So looking over the grill itself, it's pretty rough. Like I said, this thing was left sitting outside. The only problem that I could find on it was the igniter, which I did go ahead and pull apart already. Just taking that one cover off there, just unthreads. This whole box drops out the bottom. The push button and battery were missing out of it. It looks like part of it was broke. But I can get this whole new igniter assembly out here all the way out through the box and the push button for less than 20 bucks. That'll have it back up and running. I did already put the propane tank on it and checked it. Lit the first burner with the lighter. All the other burners light, turn on, go up and down to lowest setting, highest setting with no problems. So it looks like the only thing that was wrong with this was a bad igniter. And they said it wasn't working and tossed it in the dumpster. Also, after sitting outside, that top, like you're seeing, is in pretty rough shape. But if we're about to start cleaning this up, I've got some mixed up degreaser in a spray bottle over here, and we'll get it cleaned up real quick. Then we can get that top set back on here and work on seasoning that up. So this is how the top looks. After getting it back, getting it home, took it off of the base, got it on the saw box. We're about to start working on this thing, see if we can get some of this rust cleaned off, knocked down, and get this thing seasoned back up and brought back to where it should be. I'll start out using the angle grinder with kind of a cut brush. This one's flattened out a little bit, but good wire wheel on here, something that's a little bit more likely everybody's gonna have. If this isn't gonna work, then I've got access to have this thing sandblasted back down, and I'll take a video of that if that's something we're gonna have to do. But I think this wire wheel will get it. I've used it on a lot of other cast iron grill grates, pans, things like that, and it's worked pretty good. This isn't too heavy other than this one corner here, so I think we'll be able to get it cleaned on off. So starting to get a lot of this rust knocked off. It's coming off pretty easy and pretty quick. One thing you will notice, if you look in, see some of these little bits here, it looks like stuff caked onto it. That's actually what you're looking for, is your old seasoning. So that's where there was seasoning cooked onto this. That oil polymerized onto the top, gave you that non-stick coating. But you can see where there's big chunks of it that have gone away, and that's where a lot of your rust is coming from. So we're gonna go back and we're trying to get all this old seasoning knocked off, as well as the rust. If we can, get this thing back down to one good coat, some even finish on here, and we'll see if we can get us a new coat of oil baked onto it. Okay, so the wire wheel's doing a good job of knocking the rust off. The seasoning is taking a little more. Checked in the box, and I did have one of these polycarbide abrasive wheels. Pretty sure this one's from Harbor Freight. Basically, this was like a really stiff, rough sponge-looking material on it. That's what it's going to look like if you're looking for them. But it's pretty much rock hard. But it pretty quickly is pulling the seasoning and all right back down to the bare white metal again on this. I mean, I think I was grinding at this area for 20 seconds or something, so it's making pretty quick work of it. I'll see if I can get a video of it. So it's taking that off pretty quick. So I think we're going to work the rest of the top with this, see how far it goes. The one may last you long enough to get through one whole top. You may need a couple of them. Just have to kind of depend a little bit on how your top is. So we'll see how long this one lasts, and I'll update you on that. you can see in real time there, less than 10 minutes, we've got pretty much the whole flat section, get a little bit more on this front edge there, and then watch get those vertical edges. But in less than 10 minutes, when those wheels, we can have this whole thing straight down and ready to be seasoned. Okay, so I've started working on this whole lip along here, which is pretty cleaned up. Only spot we got to work on is this little corner. May have to get some steel wool or something in there. This side started. I think it's going to be easier if we stand this thing up. So what I've done is stood it up on these sawbucks and clamped it down to keep it from going anywhere. Grind as much of it as we can, shift it a little bit with the clamp, and then knock out that last area where the clamp's at. So again, even on these short sides, we're able to do the same thing. I clamped it on this side first. I was able to grind a little over half of it. Moved the clamp to this end where I'd already ground. Cleaned out this last section. So this whole thing is getting to be pretty clean. Did not even realize it said Blackstone embossed into the back of it, but it is there. So we'll have to address these inside corners. That wheel is just a little too big to fit into there and into that one tight corner here also. But overall, it's turning out pretty good. So, and of course, the goat had to come out and help.
Trying to get an apple.
Trying to get her apple. Yeah, he does that. The one thing about it is not exactly a clean process. So you may want to wear sleeves. It's extremely hot today, so that's not happening. But it's just a bunch of the dust that comes off of this. I've had an airline here that I keep it blown off as much as I can, but it still just builds up on you pretty regularly. I even went through and cleaned up a lot of this outside edge. Didn't get it as cleaned up as the inside, mainly because I'm not cooking on that surface. I'm not as worried about it being as perfectly smooth and seasoned, but we will knock all that. There's a little bit of heavy rust around that. This thing had been stored outside before it was tossed, evidently. So finally got the whole grill back together, got the top on it, got the whole thing cleaned up. Try and let you see it as best I can. It cleaned up pretty well. Top cleaned up good. I went back and hit a few more areas again for a second time, just to make sure I had all of those spots cleared up. There's a few little spots here in the middle that have just a tiny little bit of pitting, but I don't think that there's going to be enough to bother anything once we get a good seasoning on it. I'm going to take that brother pad there, steel wool, and see if I can get these corners, knock that last little bit down, and then we'll be ready to season. Got this thing moved up on the porch, so it looks like we may have a storm moving in. I had to go pick up some more oil. I thought I had some in the pantry, do not. When I went to the store to pick it up, most of the time when I re-season fresh cast iron, I've gotten where I like to use grapeseed oil. It does a really good job, has a really high smoke point, but they did not have any at the store. Could not find any. I don't know, it looks like they might not even be carrying that one anymore. So what I have picked up is some avocado oil. It's going to be kind of your next closest thing as far as the smoke point is concerned. For the seasoning, we'd prefer to have something that's going to have a really high smoke point, because we're going to need to get this nice and hot to really bake that finish onto it and get it to polymerize like it needs to, give us that non-stick coating. So something that's got a really high flash point is going to be good for that. There's other stuff that you can use. A lot of your other oils, olive oil, pretty low smoke point. If you have trouble getting that up high enough to really get a good seasoning on it, you can. But again, it's going to have a little bit lower smoke point, so you run the risk of, if you're cooking stuff at a high temp, you're really going to get a fast sear on it, you get the temperature of this thing up a lot, then you're going to risk burning and cooking off a lot of your seasoning, which could lead to problems down the road. You'll see that seasoning start to chunking back off, flaking off. You're either not going to have a good thick enough coating, or you could use something like that that's really starting to smoke off on you at your temps you're trying to cook at if you're cooking stuff a little bit higher heat on this. You can use things like lard and other fats like that, bacon grease, I think people use. Those are good. I prefer using stuff like lard when I'm cooking, but when you're seasoning something with it, if it's something you're going to run the risk of not cooking for a little while on there, if it's going to sit, you're not using it regularly all the time, then you have to worry about that, those fats actually starting to go rancid and go bad on you, which is going to affect your seasoning. It's going to affect the taste of the food that you cook on there. So unless it's something that you know you're using this thing really regularly, keeping that seasoning up, kind of cycling that fat through and cooking it on good, then that's something you may want to avoid if it's especially on something like it's a pan that you only use on rare occasions and most of the time it's sitting in your cabinet, or if it's something like this Blackstone that you may only use once a month or something, you don't use it very often, then that would probably not be a good option for you if you're somebody that's using, like I use my cast iron pans pretty much daily. Those I could get by with on it. Something like this Blackstone, it's the first one I've had. I don't know how often I'm going to use it. Try to use it pretty regularly, I believe. I mean, we'll cook breakfast for the kids, pancakes, bacon, eggs. I can do all that all at one time versus doing that on the gas stove now with a small griddle and all. So I'm sure it'll get used at least a few times a week. We'll see how much more often than that it ends up getting used. But those are some things you want to take into account whenever you're trying to pick out which oil or how you're going to season your top. So let me see if I can get this last little bit of areas cleaned up and get the rust off of them, and then we'll get this thing fired up and start working on getting a coat of seasoning cooked onto it. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up the first coat here. It's really darkening on up in the center. Some of the edges are going to need a little bit more of a coat. So it's kind of a semi-second coat. I'll let that first coat get on. Keep it on pretty thin, almost extremely thin as it's heating up. Once it starts to get heated up good, then I add a slight second coat once that first one starts to smoke just a little bit. Level that second coat off on there. And what you're waiting on is it to get up to that smoke point. Again, we picked something with a pretty high smoke point. It's a little hard to see in the camera, but I think we're picking it up. Just smoking. Let it smoke and really try and cook off. You're really trying to cook off that organic compounds in there, everything other than the parts in the oil that are going to help it polymerize to the surface. And that's what gives you that solid non-stick surface once it's done. So you're going to let that really cook off, smoke off for a little while. It may take you 20 minutes or so to let it smoke off. Once that goes, you'll put another coat on, repeat that same process. You're probably going to need to put 3 to 4 coats by the time it's all done. But this is coat number 2, and then we'll see if we can get another coat on here. Remember though, you're going to keep your coats relatively thin on each coat. You don't really want to lay it down real heavy. If you do, it'll start getting sticky and tacky, and that thick coat like that is also what cause some of your coating to start chipping off and coming off in chunks later on. Just put on coat number 3, and you can really see it on this one. That top's getting hot now, so as soon as that oil's hitting and getting spread out, it's starting to smoke off. So you see it really starting to get a good color in the center. The outside edges, like this front corner here, just are not getting quite as hot, so they're not taking on quite as much color. Hopefully, as we kind of cook through this third, maybe 4th coat, those edges will pick up a little bit more color. And I already know I'm probably going to catch some different thoughts and opinions and flack on the color when it's finished. Some people are going to say it needs to be black. Some people are going to say brown's fine. Most of the time when I've re-seasoned anything and haven't had any problems with it, it's somewhere in a dark brown. It's not always solid black like what you're seeing on your new Lodge cast iron that you get in or something like that. It does take on color, but a lot of times it's just a really dark brown there to begin with, and then over time as you cook on it and build that seasoning through what you're cooking and the oils and fats that you're using in that and treating it properly, it really take on a good dark color over time. It's just not usually going to have it right off the bat. Now this is right over the burner is going to get a little bit darker. I have noticed too that it seems like the oil that you're using will somewhat affect that color a little bit too. This is avocado oil, like I said. I almost feel like the grapeseed oil that I have used also, even more so, kind of puts on that brown color as it seasons to the cookware. But I think that will have a little bit of effect on it too. So if you're using something like Blackstone's, their own seasoning branded that they put out for it, versus using something like your avocado oil or grapeseed oil or lard or whatever it is you're going to put on, I think it's going to have an effect on that final color too. That's not something that I've done enough with and kind of tested out to know for sure, but that may be something to look into the next time I go to season one of these. May kind of split it to something like your avocado oil on one side and maybe the Blackstone seasoning on the other, and see if that really does have much of an effect or change in the color of that as it goes. Okay, so coat number 3 is just about cooked off. There's a little bit of smoke still coming off of it, but it's pretty minimal at this point. You can see we're really starting to take on deep color over the majority of the top, especially down through the middle. It's a little bit lighter brown out towards the outside edges. These corners over here are still just not quite as dark as the rest of it. So we'll see if I can get just a little bit more into those corners as I do this. I just don't think they don't seem to be just taking as much heat as the rest of it is. So get my tongs together. With the way this thing is as hot as it is, you don't want to put it on by hand. So I'm using a tong to kind of, with a paper towel, to spread this around. So I'll put a little bit to this edge over here, and then I'll just put just a little bit down the center. It doesn't take a whole lot. We're going to spread it out. You'll see it already starts to kind of run around, and then we're just going to work on evenly spreading this out. We don't want it to get super thick. We'll just try and spread it out, keep it relatively thin. We kind of have a puddle, it looks like, that has set in that corner, which I think might be causing part of that problem. So see if we can kind of pull that puddle of oil that's running to that corner. See if that helps us. Really want to try and get a nice even coat, because this will hopefully, fingers crossed, be our final coat for the night. It is getting late. We got a storm rolling in, and I would like to go to bed before I have to go to work in the morning. So I am coating the outside edges of this just a little bit. Remember, I kind of knocked that chunky rust off of there. I didn't go down as far with it as I did on the inside where my cooking surfaces are, but I did take part of that down, so I want to get at least some of a coating on it to help make sure we don't have that rust start back up, especially with the storm coming in and humidity getting up real high, a lot of moisture in there. That bare metal will flash rust on you pretty quick if you don't have some type of coating on it. Just really want to work that corner to make sure that I've got some in it and it doesn't puddle up, because that seemed to be maybe the problem earlier, that it almost got puddled a little bit in that back corner where the oil was settling to. So we'll let this 4th coat cook off, see how we look at that point, but I think that it's going to be done after that. I think we'll be to a pretty good stopping point. Now, the one thing that I am running into with this is that, seeing as how it was free and I pulled it out of a dumpster, there was not a cover in there that I could find for it. So it's probably something I'm going to have to build, but it shouldn't be too difficult. Maybe see if I can get a video on getting that cover built for this. I'll pull the dimensions, what we got overall. Probably just build it out of some thin sheet metal, a couple of handles on each side that I can just sit over the top of it once it's cooled down after I've cleaned it up from cooking. Then just set the cover back on it, and that'll keep any rain, bugs, things like that from trying to get back into it as it's sitting here on this front porch. So the porch is covered, but it's near the edge. You have to worry about stuff potentially blowing in if we get a hard rainstorm coming in. So right now though, it's looking pretty good. All this area looks really good. It's just this couple of corners that I'm a little bit concerned about, but we'll let those go and cook off some more, smoke off, see how it does, and then worst case I may come back and do just another light coat or two just in this area to see if we can darken it up and leave the rest of it alone. We are getting to a pretty dark brown for most of this, nearly black in the center, but really dark brown over the rest of it. It's actually looking a little bit lighter with this flashlight on the phone right now than it does in person. Well, wrapping this video up, we got the 4th coat on. Seems to have smoked off all the way. We have pretty even dark brown color across the entire surface. It's kind of gotten a little bit more of a matte look to it. If it's still looking super shiny, then you probably still got a little more to cook off, or you've gotten it a little too thick, a little too heavy on maybe that final coat, and it's probably actually going to be kind of tacky and sticky, which again is what you want to avoid. But thankfully we had enough propane in the tank to make it through all 4 coats. So now we'll let this thing just sit and cool and check back in on it in the morning. And I think we're going to be happy with what we got. That'll be a good starting point, and then just have to make sure that it's really getting seasoned well and taken care of properly between different things that we're cooking. But each time we cook, clean it all back off, make sure it's oiled back down lightly. Again, even with the coats between cooks, you only want a nice light coat on there, enough to kind of help seal that surface up, make sure it's not going to potentially oxidize and rust on you to get a real good seasoning layer build up. And that'll just kind of come with time. Either way, it's a good practice to do in between each time, especially if you're cleaning it off. If you're dumping water on it, do like a harsh deglaze on it or something like that between cooks, you really might be taking a little bit more of that seasoning and also adding a layer back while it's still hot, at least pretty warm, and letting that kind of cook back onto it between coats will help that seasoning preserve and keep that top saved longer, so that you don't have to do this entire process over again anytime too soon.